Centipede's dilemma. It's the idea that actively thinking about a normally unconscious or automatic activity impairs its performance. Its name comes from this cool poem, where a centipede starts consciously thinking of which leg to move and doesn't know how to walk anymore. Also, think about breathing. You're now manually breathing. Volunteer's dilemma. Let's say there's someone who's being assaulted in public by a serial killer, and there are dozens of people witnessing it. All of them think that the others would contact the police anyway, and don't want to risk getting involved with the serial killer, so nobody ends up calling the police. It's exactly what happened to Kitty Genovese in New York in 1964. This dilemma may also be called the bystander effect, or the Genovese syndrome. Transplant dilemma. If the demand for organs for transplants exceeds the supply, who should have priority in getting them? The youngest patients, the sickest ones, the healthier ones, or the ones who've been on the waiting list for longer? Morton's fork. This one is a false dilemma, in which contradictory observations lead to the same conclusion. It takes its name from John Morton, who in the 15th century attempted to rationalize paying taxes to King Henry by saying that someone living modestly must be saving money and therefore could afford the tax, whereas someone living extravagantly was obviously rich and therefore could also afford the tax. Dictator's dilemma. A dictator who relies on repression of the public in order to stay in power can't understand what people really think, as they fake their preferences and votes to avoid punishment from him. Autonomous vehicle dilemma. Should a self-driving car protect the driver or the pedestrians? Strategic voting dilemma. Some voters face a choice: voting for their preferred candidate, who may have little chance of winning, or voting strategically for a less preferred candidate who has a better chance of winning. If too many voters choose to vote for their ideal candidate, they may inadvertently help a less desirable candidate win by splitting the vote. But if everyone votes strategically, the preferred candidate never gains traction, and the election results may not reflect the true preferences of the electorate. Böckenförde dilemma. It's the theory that liberal non-religious states require values such as civic responsibility and honesty, but cannot guarantee their existence through legislation or force, since in that case it wouldn't be a liberal state anymore. This puts the liberal state in an unstable position, where the only guarantee it has is the internal moral sense of people. Samaritan's dilemma. It's a concept in economics that describes a situation where helping someone in need can create a dependency or reduce their motivation to improve their situation, as they can rely on said help. The dilemma stems from the fact that the Samaritan might be giving help to the recipient to give him a chance to better his condition, while the opposite might happen. Social dilemma. It's a situation in which all individuals would be better off cooperating, but fail to do so because of conflicting interests between individuals that discourage joint action. Real-life examples can be found in environmental problems, such as climate change, and in political issues, like the non-voting issues. Hedgehog's dilemma. This one refers to a situation in which a group of hedgehogs seek to move close to one another to stay warm during cold weather, but they must remain apart, as they cannot avoid hurting one another with their sharp spines. It was created by Schopenhauer to explain human relationships, since we cannot be intimate without the risk of mutual harm, leading to cautious relationships. Heinz dilemma. In the dilemma, a man named Heinz has a wife who is critically ill and needs a very expensive drug to survive. Heinz cannot afford the drug, and the pharmacist who discovered the drug refuses to lower the price or allow Heinz to pay later. The pharmacist is charging 10 times what it costs him to make the medicine. Faced with this situation, Heinz considers breaking into the pharmacy to steal the drug to save his wife's life. The central question is whether stealing it would be ethical. What's important is the form of the response to this dilemma, since it could be attributed to one of the 6 stages of moral development. Schelling's dilemma. Also known as the Hobbesian trap, this theory explains why preemptive attacks are made between 2 groups or individuals. It happens when they both have fear of an imminent attack, and it leads to a fear spiral in which fear will lead to an arms race, which in turn will lead to increasing fear. Even though cooperation would be the better outcome for both sides, mutual distrust leads to the adoption of strategies that have negative outcomes for both individual players and all players combined. It's one of the examples that show why humans don't always act with 100% rationale, and it's pretty commonly used in game theory. Innocent prisoner's dilemma. This one is a side effect of a legal system in which admission of guilt can result in reduced sentences. This system might punish an innocent person for their integrity and reward a person lacking in integrity as he admits guilt to avoid a longer sentence. Munchhausen trilemma. This one is a philosophical concept that wants to demonstrate the theoretical impossibility of proving any truth, even in the fields of logic and mathematics, without appealing to pre-accepted assumptions. When you say something is true and someone asks for proof, you can provide evidence to support it. However, the person can then ask for proof of that evidence, and so on, making him able to keep asking for proof of each new piece of evidence endlessly. It says that there are only 3 ways of completing a proof. The circular argument, in which the proof of some proposition presupposes the truth of that very proposition; the regressive argument, in which each proof requires a further proof, and so on infinitely; and the dogmatic argument, which rests on accepted precepts which are merely asserted rather than defended. Prisoner's dilemma. It's the most famous game theory thought experiment, and it involves 2 rational agents, each of whom can cooperate for mutual benefit or betray their partner for individual reward. Let's set up a hypothetical scenario. 2 gang members, called John Blue and John Red, are arrested and imprisoned. Each prisoner is in solitary confinement with no means of speaking to the other, and the police admit they don't have enough evidence to convict them. If both of them don't talk, they get 1 year of prison each for a less serious charge. But the police officer offers each prisoner a choice. If he testifies against his partner, he will go free, while the partner will get 3 years in prison on the main charge. But if both prisoners testify against each other, both will be sentenced to 2 years in jail. The best overall option for the group would be for both of them to stay silent, as it amounts to only 2 years in prison. But the best option for each singular person would be to betray their partner. Let's take a look at John Blue's perspective. If he thinks that Red will stay silent, it's more convenient for him to betray him, since he'd get freed. And if he thinks that Red will betray, it would also be more convenient for him to betray, as he'd get 2 years instead of 3. Triffin dilemma. It's the economic problem that a national currency faces when it becomes a world's reserve currency, like the US dollar. The dilemma arises because the country issuing the reserve currency must supply the world with enough currency to meet international demand for liquidity, which means running trade deficits. However, running persistent trade deficits can erode confidence in the currency's value, leading to a potential financial crisis. On the other hand, if the country tries to eliminate trade deficits to maintain the currency's value, it will create a shortage of liquidity in the global economy, harming international trade and economic stability. This creates a fundamental conflict between short-term economic goals and long-term global stability. Trolley problem. It's an ethical dilemma, and it consists of a scenario in which a runaway tram or trolley is on course to collide with and kill 5 people down the track. But you, being a driver or bystander, can intervene and divert the vehicle to kill just 1 person on a different track. It basically poses the question, is sacrificing 1 person to save a larger number the right thing to do? Warnock's dilemma. This one says that there's no sure way to understand why nobody replies to your community posts and forums, etc. It might mean that the topic was uninteresting, that it was written so badly that they didn't even bother answering, or that it was so well written that there wasn't anything to add in the comments. Monty Hall dilemma. Imagine you're on a game show with 3 doors. Behind one door is a car, the prize, and behind the other 2 doors are goats. You pick one door, let's say door 1. The host, Monty Hall, who knows what is behind each door, then opens another door, let's say door 3, which has a goat. Monty then asks if you want to switch your choice to door 2 or stay with door 1. The dilemma is whether to switch or stay. The counterintuitive but mathematically proven solution is that you should always switch. Initially, you have a 1/3 chance of picking the car and a 2/3 chance of picking a goat. When Monty reveals a goat behind one of the other 2 doors, the 2/3 probability effectively transfers to the remaining unopened door. By switching, you now have a 2/3 chance of winning the car, compared to a 1/3 chance if you stick with your original choice. Tragedy of the commons. The tragedy of the commons is a criticized concept that states that if many people enjoy unfettered access to a finite, valuable resource such as a pasture, they will tend to overuse it and may end up destroying its value altogether. If you want to discuss this video or suggest an idea for the next one, join my Discord, link in the description.